Hi, everyone. So, this is a lecture on the short film, 14 minutes long, titled 3000 by Asinnajaq. And I believe it came out in 2017. I think it's on the next slide. This slide or this section is just information from the producers of her film, NFB, the National Film Board of Canada, and it's just from their website. So I'll just quickly read this off. In this short film, Inuk artist Asinnajaq plunges us into a sublime imaginary universe, 14 minutes of luminescent archive-inspired cinema that recasts the present, past, and future of her people in a radiant new light. Diving into the NFB's vast archive, she parses the complicated cinematic representation of the Inuit, harvesting fleeting truths and fruititious accidents from a range of sources: newsreels, propaganda, ethnographic docs, and work by Indigenous filmmakers. Embedding historic footage into original animation, she conjures up a vision of hope and beautiful possibility. So normally what I do when I'm in a classroom, and this is our version of a classroom, is I will summarize the material that we are going over. And I do that because summarizing is very important in all manners of your education and your work. And I even suggest it's important on a personal level. So summarizing is also a common writing assignment in most university courses. It refers to just summarizing a particular piece of material or even a lab outcome. You have probably come across this type of assignment, but if you are unfamiliar with it in a university context, it is also a feature in everyday life. So just think like when someone says to you, are you familiar with, I don't know, the television series that's just been released from HBO called Raised by Wolves? And then they might then summarize it for you. And depending on what they're like with summarizing, it could be a good summary or a bad summary. So there are three main requirements. A summary should cover the original, the entire material as a whole. The material should be presented in a neutral fashion. That means you and what you think of it should be absent. It should be a condensed version of the material that is also presented in your own words. Normally, there are no quotations. It's only paraphrasing. And often with summaries, they're often very short, like one paragraph, like about 350 words. And so then I'm just giving you now an example of a summary of 3000. And you'll notice that this opening is indicating what material I am talking about, who created that material, and when it was created. And then you'll also, as you go on reading, you'll notice you don't know what I think about it, not from this. I give you an appearance of objectivity, and there are ways that I do that. I've never used a personal pronoun, so you're not seeing any I. You're also not seeing any emotion, and also you're not seeing an opinion. I only and merely tell you what it is about. So I will just briefly read this. 3000 from 2017 is a short film running 14 minutes from Asinnajaq, an Inuk artist, using historic footage from such disparate sources as newsreels, ethnographic documents, work by Indigenous filmmakers, and propaganda. Asinnajaq constructs an alternative view of time and an internalized gaze of the Inuktitut. By embedding her own original animation, Asinnajaq illustrates a tenuous tie between past, present, and future, while suggesting a future of expectation and opportunity. So this isn't perfect. I don't like that I've said future so close to one another. So I've said like future here. And I heard it just, and I've said it here after you start. Oh, or it just means I make a big Um, so, um, I I don't like that. And also you'll notice it's similar to the summary that the National Film Board of Canada has on their website. The difference is this is completely lacking an opinion or emotion. Whereas from the National Film Board of Canada's website, if there is, it's more like a review. It's more like kind of like trying to sell the item. There is definitely emotion present there. So normally when we're covering material, I'll also then move into important aspects of these first two pieces we're looking at are film, just because it's really difficult to find plays from the Inuit people. So, but then later on we'll be looking at plays. So, whatever we're looking at, I will normally follow the summary with important aspects of the material. So, what I think is really interesting is that this opens with sounds. Wind, which is indicative of weather, animals, indicative of season, and language, which is indicative of culture or a nationhood. And only kind of after we're immersed in all of these sounds that give us so much information, then Asinnajaq speaks. She frames the film as something outside of herself, which I find interesting when she says, "It seems inconceivable as I live now, but I will die and there will be a world where I don't exist." I find this really interesting on two levels. I find it especially interesting because the Inuit people believe that when a child is born, it is the spirit or the soul of one of their ancestors that is returning. And so they believe in what we would think of as reincarnation, with a very with familial ties. So I find that very interesting that she's kind of stepped outside of that or hasn't addressed it. I also find it interesting because she's kind of framing it in the instance of she's going to show us, if you've seen the whole film, and you should have by now, she shows us a world that she imagines that will exist. And of course, it will exist outside of her life at this point. I think this is my favorite part of the film, right here at the beginning, where she discusses her father and how and where he was born and how she was born. And I think it's really, really beautiful and really evocative. I also think it's a really interesting kind of twist on the way Indigenous cultures, are those that I am familiar with, um, are transparent with what many might think of as lineage, meaning we indicate where our people come from and who they are. So I quite like how the interesting way she does this. And I think it's incredibly poetic and really beautiful. I also quite like the way she introduces where she's from or where her people are from. And I love how she says, "I am a little caribou woman." And what this tells us, if you know the Arctic, is it tells us where she's from. So in Inuktitut, what she would say is Ihamiyat. And I find that word very difficult. I'm not saying the last portion right. I have a very Anglo tongue, so I apologize. But what Ihamiyat means is people from beyond are inland dwelling people from the barren lands. So she's actually with this I am a little caribou woman telling us where her people are located. She's giving us land. So, and here you'll notice I'm just repeating myself, but I'm also providing you with, and I think it's important to provide you with, proof, evidence for my assertions. What I'm offering in the next few slides is how I want you to consider and possibly make your own notes on the film. So I'm just going to toss out some ideas that you might want to consider or might want to rewatch the film and take notes on. Notice the images of snow, dogs, water, people. Notice the shift from black and white film footage to color footage. So she used archival footage from the 1920s and I believe right up to the current day. So she's spanning quite a large span of time. Consider the effect of sound. And the image I've provided here is an image of two Inuit people, girls, throat singing. And this is normally done in pairs, and it's kind of like a friendly competition. Think about the various other elements, such as the spinning top made of ice, and the hard, cold climate that is so incredibly tangible. The ulu and how it is used throughout, like we see it used in the 1920s, and it just we see it reappearing and reappearing. And the ulu is that curved knife. Kayak and water, whales, the fur trade, industry, and how we see it just suddenly appear, towns, gas boats, fishing, basket weaving, which is the basket weaving segment is Asinnajaq's paternal grandmother, and it's from a film her father made, and of course the Northern Lights. So take your time and attempt to understand, come to grips with the concept of time as developed throughout this piece, because it's quite different. This there is a merging. There isn't a separation between past and present. There isn't a separation between present and future. There's it's almost like they're all coexisting at one moment, which very is quite an Inuit way of thinking of time. So, and now I've just given you some concepts, ideas, information, and so on that may be new to you. So this is from an article, a scholarly article called Today is Today and Tomorrow is Tomorrow, Reflection on Inuit Understanding of Time and Place. And it's a quote, the conception of time developed by and inculcated, which just means taught, an Inuit is essentially contingent. That is, it depends on a complex state of affairs, which affect how, when, and why people act. So time is for time in different cultures moves and is experienced differently. So consider for many Euro-Canadians or white settlers, time is an absolute. It's a very mechanical, technological thing. There's 365 days in a year, there's 24 hours in a day. Every third year we have leap years, so that all of a sudden, Christmas isn't in the summertime. But for many indigenous cultures, time isn't an absolute. It's really dependent upon, for example, for the Inuit, place, animals, elements, weather. All of this figures into a concept of time. And this is an art installation by Asinnajaq, and it's three hearts made of sealskin denoting past, present, and future. And you'll notice that there are three hearts, but they're the same, so that there's something interconnected, interdependent, and different than the way a white settler or Euro-Canadians or a Western mind would conceive of as time. And this is another quote. In 1854, an Inuit man told an explorer that only when a certain star reached a point in the sky no higher than another star would it be the time to harness their dogs. And I think this is an example of the Western mind trying to make sense of how Indigenous people conceive or use time. So it's a way of actually saying, okay, so this Inuit man is using time with stars or with sun or with seasons. And that's really actually quite simplistic. It's far more complicated than that. So what I'm going to give as an example is Inuit cartography. These are examples from Greenland. So these pieces of wood, they're driftwood, and these pieces of wood are maps. And you'll see that the carving of this driftwood is relating to the coastline here. And they're often quite small, and Inuit hunters and travelers or Inuit people carry them just sometimes in their pocket, and it guides them through their land. So I'm going to ask you, is it possible that an Inuit, an indigenous way of moving, understanding, and interacting with time might be as different as the way they make a map? So I'm hoping that kind of helps you understand that it's so removed from a technical, absolute reasoning of the passage of time. So that is all I have for 3000 for this lecture. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're taking down your own notes and what you think of it. Of course, if you have any questions, please be in touch with me. As you know, I think this is an absolutely stunning, beautiful film, and I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I have enjoyed it. So take care and be well.